Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're all keeping well. Thank you very much for attending the North Wales Technical Talk by Malcolm Ingry. Malcolm, I've known Malcolm many years from the same industry and lately working for the same company. I hope you enjoy it and find it very informative. Over to you, Malcolm.
Okay, cheers. Okay, guys, this might be a little bit different to what you're used to. I've asked Mark if you all use explosives. I'm not quite sure, so I'll fire from the hip, excuse the pun on this one, and start to go. So what I'm going to try and do over the next 3/4 of an hour is just give you an invite into the world of demolition and the film industry, which I've worked in for a good many years, other than my mining experience and my quarrying experience working with EPC. So I fell into this on my first film was Saving Private Ryan. So just enjoy the ride and we'll see where we go with this. So as far as the industry is concerned, the film and the demolition industry, we used pretty well, which started with me many years ago, where they used to use pyrotechnics, and I got the chance to go to Pinewood. So we tend to use nitroglycerin cartridges, ANFO if they're dry condition, shaped charges, aluminium flash powder, and I'll explain that as we go along why we use that. Black powder in a lot of cases, detonating cord, electric detonators, shock tube, electronics on the last few films, that seemed to have addressed a lot of issues of misfires. And Wi-Fi blasting systems, which I know if there's anybody there sitting listening to me, they are in certain quarries, but generally, you know, we like to use them as long as we've got direct line of sight in the film industry. Demolition industry, they're still dragging their feet, but you know, the modern explosives, as far as electronics, are coming into some kind of systems. So I'll start off here. We'll try and make a loud bang. This I got involved with a few years ago when we had if some of you remember, the shoe bomber. So I was asked by a company to replicate what we thought the damage would be done with the shoe bomb. So that's Semtex, as you can see in the shoe. We quickly run out in my house of bags and shoes, because I'm always trying to use them to make bangs. But that's a typical, and the bomber at the time on the airplane would actually put a heel on there covering the Semtex. And this is the shoe on a steel plate, a good substantial plate, and this will give you an indication just how powerful Semtex is on this type of improvised IED.
3, 2, 1.
Okay, and there's the effect of the shoe bomb, just placed on, so it's not fastened on. You know, it's just direct. If you'd have punched a hole in that Semtex with your finger, then the hole would have been smaller, as though it had been drilled. But that is the effect of Semtex. It's got a velocity of detonation of something like 8,000 meters per second, and it's one of the most Brisson's type explosives that you can get, typically military. So this is again, sticking with the film industry, this is how when you look at your television or and it's general all the way through. There's nothing, what's the word, a black mistake or anything. To get a good bomb hit or a good bang out the ground, you can see there 5 cartridges of nitroglycerin, which is approximately 1 kilogram on a sandbag. The reason we put it on a sandbag is if you put it on the floor, it reclines into the ground and moves shrapnel, dirt, stones throughout, killing the stuntmen. So you let it recline into a bag, okay? And then what you do, you can see there, anybody who understands explosives, I've got detonating cord coming all the way around in a ring main, so you won't put your detonator, you'll put it outside. So if you have a bad detonator, you can replace it without digging into the pile. Yeah, that's cement. Over the last few years, we've started to use lime dust, because what happens with cement, with the intense heat of the explosives, it makes it into concrete, and it moves big lumps of concrete around, again injuring people. So it's a fine limestone dust. And then we put our peat, our turf, and whatever. And basically, there's your bomb hit. We usually put a wide pointer if we've got 4 or 5. So when you've got stuntmen running about, you ensure that you know where they are, where you're pressing the button. Some companies have switches with probably 20 or 30 switches on, and 20 or 30 sequences, whatever you want to do. So it's all done electrically. We also then put a dumb. The films that have a lot of money, not most of them, but the big ones, they'll get 2 dummies and they'll do a test with not real rocks, but to get a distance, just how far they need to be away from the bomb hit or wherever they're doing. Okay, and then finally, Malcolm Ingry steps into the breach, and he stands there. Sometimes his wife finds out he's got brown underpants, and I have a go at doing it myself. I'm standing next to there quite a lot of nitroglycerine, so this is the effect. Sorry. 1. I can assure you that's not a cardboard cutout, that's me. Okay. 2, 1. And there you can see how high it goes. So it's quite a substantial bang. And then once I'm happy, then we'll go on to the set and start doing it with the stuntmen. Again, petrol bangs. A normal standard way of doing petrol bangs is to get 12-gram detonating cord, as you can see, coiled up there on that container. And in the very end of the container, inside in the middle, is what I would actually call a firework, a Chinese flash powder type firework. So the cord atomizes the petrol, and the flash powder actually makes your petrol and the flash. So the next slide, I think it is a typical test down in the Docklands down in London, using this and quarry shock tube detonators. I think 25 millisecond increments to have a napalm run. Beautiful. Okay, so you can see that done with gallon containers, and it's very effective. It's safe. You put it on some sand, and in places like London where it's built up, it's over in a few seconds, and it's done safely. This is, I think, world is not enough. There's no sound on this. I'm inside a steel container inside this barge, which has been made up. It's a steel barge they pull up and down the Thames for the refuse, and they've built a sort of a sailing rig out of it, all made of wood. And the whole idea, Nigel Mansell's boat's there going by it, then it goes off as we go by. We set it off. On the actual film, I believe, the film is coming from the other way. So this is from the back. So you can be quite effective. I'm safely in a steel box, and then there's one fireman down underneath these hose. Right, this is the sound on this is not very good. This is in a churchyard, a National Trust churchyard, just off the M25. Not the M25. It's the other one, High Wycombe. And Johnny English is at the top, which is Mr. Bean, and we're at the bottom, and he's saying this is the safest place. And what we've done, we've got quite a lot of petrol around the grave stones. And basically he's saying, you know, everything's safe, we're burying him and nothing can go wrong.
I think you'll find it's rather more than just business. You are now entering the most secure location in the whole of Scot.
As you can see, it's quite a lot to set that up, because you've got a National Trust church, so you've got air overpressure, vibration, all those kind of things. So there was a lot of work done beforehand to ensure that the National Trust and the vicar let us loose in his churchyard. Okay, this is Hannibal Lecter. This is the first take, which was done abroad. There was a period of time where a lot of films was made in sort of Poland and those areas, cheap labour. So this is the first take of a plane going down towards a tank. Once we're all satisfied, then this is the second take. See, there's quite a lot of planning there. You've got people there, real life people, stuntmen, and it looks quite effective. And again, the detaching is a small explosive that detaches the plane off a hook and that goes down as well. So it works in with the actual thing. Now this next one is I'm just trying to think. It's Batman. And what we've done here, what they do, the director brings you in and tells you what he wants. They use a lot of cartoon sort of sequences, and they say, this is what we want. This is Dark Knight, and this was done in Chicago. So this is basically his comic strip telling you he wants the school bus, he wants the Joker's cards coming out, he wants a real live building he can demolish. They don't ask for much. And then this is done just prior to the school bus on its way. And then the building actually drops. At the time, we looked all over the UK to find something suitable. I was working on a demolition up in Glasgow. We looked at that, but it wasn't what he wanted. So they had to go to Chicago. And we worked with a guy called Mark Larazzo. And you'll see a lot of his videos if you go on YouTube. He's been here a couple of times in Sellafield and Liverpool, and I've worked with him quite a few times. So you've saw what the director wants, and this is the actual day in Chicago. So only have one take.
We're rolling. 3, 2, 1, action. He's on the move.
Everything has to be done right. One mistake and you kill people. So Joker's cards. See the guy in the white overalls getting into the vehicle. That's the cue to start and move everything else.
Nice. Brilliant. That was brilliant.
God knows what that cost, but we're running into the millions to actually do that. This, anybody who's sitting there listening to me pontificate on, and hasn't used explosives, this will give you a good indication of the strength. Now, this is black powder, small amount, couple of ounces. And inside you can see the vehicle there where that door's open. That's a steel pipe, and inside is a wooden piston. And in that piston is a small amount, egg cupful of black powder, which is ignited by the driver as he goes along. Quite a substantial sized truck. Okay, they'll lighten it as much as they can. So this will give you an indication of what happens when the black powder is initiated and makes the piston, i.e. the piece of wood long like a telegraph pole, come out of the vehicle. Okay. So it's giving you some indication, and that is an explosive that deflagrates. It doesn't detonate, so it burns. Travels at about 1,000 meters per second. So when we talk about the ones you use in quarry, you know, they detonate and they travel at about 4,000 to 5,000 meters per second. So you can see, you know, what you're dealing with. Again, on a lot of these films, they'll start with a steel frame, which is the same strength as maybe a Land Rover. And in that right hand there, that corner, is another piston with a small charge in. And they'll do tests to see how far they can lift this if there was explosives or an IED put underneath. And then they'll revert then to the real vehicle. So once they know how far it will lift, you know, and then they'll go back to... this is me and a guy called Charlie Adcock I work close with, having a mess about on a Saturday afternoon.
One.
Okay, this is from what you saw before, this is now the actual film, Ridley Scott, Body of Lies. And when you get on these sets, it really is like a war scene. So you've got all the people, cameramen, microphones there, and it's all kicking off. See that guy? And then that goes back to the film people, and then they do what they've got to do with it to make. They put a lot of the noise in after. This was done in South Wales, in Newport, Captain America. It was a difficult one, this, because what they wanted some army vehicles here, and Captain America was going to come out of here on his motorbike, and they wanted to drop this, which was a light building, and you can't normally drop them with explosives because it's light brick. So you use the inertia of a block of flats. It's easier to do than a light brick building. So this is the building. If I take you around the back, you can see what we've done. We've took the roof off because there was asbestos, exposed all the steel. So the view of the camera is from the front. And then you cut all the steel, as you can see in special cuts, so it's still holding the building up. The structural engineer will tell you how many you can cut. And then, as you can see there, as I say in Afrikaans, you enzil a bomb. You actually make a bomb. You have a cut there and a cut there, and the maximum amount of nitroglycerin cartridge you can get by your calculation. That's how many fingers you've got on your hand. There's no hard and fast calculation, only from experience. And you kick that leg out, and you do that with all of them. And when you kick the legs out, actually the building comes down. A little bit of useless information. This is what they was doing down at Didcot in Oxford prior to blasting that washery plant. And 5 guys got buried even before they put the explosives on. The structural engineer, whoever, and the case is still going on with the HSE. And the building collapsed on them, killing them all. And that case is still going on. I think it's been about 4 or 5 years now. So this is the building coming down. Now this is in slow motion, so it doesn't do it justice. And there's a couple of 100 gallons of petrol inside as well, just to give it a good effect. And you can see the building start to drop and pull over. And the film people have got their effect. The next slide's a little bit more interesting because you've come from the back now. And it's down on the floor. Okay, nothing left. Anybody who's got caravanners out there, I did this many, many years ago. The first one fails, the second one worked. Now, this is not explosives, it's propane gas. So it's gas that you would use when you go caravanning. And we put it in a balloon. When I say a balloon, I mean a kiddie's balloon. Put it inside the caravan. So it was only a small balloon you could just hold in your hand. And then fed oxygen to try and feed it. And just took a normal caravan from a caravan site without it being took out. The first one fails. But the second one, maybe focus your mind once we start caravanning again in the very near future.
2, 1. 2, 1.
Okay, so it'll give you some indication just how volatile propane is. This is Coventry City football ground, basically on the touchline when they rebuilt it. And this was a gasometer, which was done with cutting charges quite a few years ago now. So this is the film.
The warning siren, and Mrs. Skuse did her stuff, heralding the way for Coventry City's new ground.
Okay, I'll just take you back to that now. What actually do when you drop, they're not easy to drop. You can see there's a cut along there and it goes back like a sail. So the whole idea when you do these gasometers is that you put shaped charges across the bottom and you kick this sail out. And when you kick this sail out, and then the rest of the of it comes. So it's not, they're not easy structures to drop down. This is in Mid Wales, a Criggian, by Criggian Quarry. This is where there was 3 masts and 3 towers for the Cold War early warning system. It was an interesting one because we had some failures on this one. I lost a few nights' sleep, and unfortunately, I have a holiday caravan a few metres away. And so everybody knew I was doing it or part of it. So I had egg on my face on this one. But you learn by your mistakes, I can assure you. So there's the towers. These are military cutting charges. Basically, how they work. There's a standoff. It's called the Monroe effect. And whatever the standoff is, and the amount of RDX or plastic military explosives go through through this where that detonator is. And then cuts the steel. This particular one, we wanted a military cutting charge that would cut up to 40 mil steel, so quite substantial. Again, you don't have to bolt it on; you can just tie it on with rope. It makes its contact, but not an easy exercise to do by anybody's standard because it has to be precise. The timings. And the timings on shock tube detonators and electric detonators is horrible. So if you've got 2 charges against each other, what normally happens is one will kick the other one off. So we tend these days to use detonating cord, equal lengths, and that's it's even more accurate than electronic detonators. So there's the hinges you make. So you put it round like this. This is 1150 grams per metre blade. Don't make it now. It is not nice stuff to deal with. And what you normally have to do as well, you have to normally put a bolt hole in this when you're making these cuts and shears, because what happens, it not only cuts, it kicks. And I've known pieces like that, if you don't fasten it down and steel it with chain, will travel probably half a mile. You can hear it coming through the edges, towards you, and it don't really know where you're going to have to run. And there's the cut, which it makes. So that makes the hinge. So you cut across the back there and a cut there, and then that allows the hinge for the structure to drop based on what the structural engineer will let you do. And there's the cut. That brass copper look you've got there, that's from the shape charge. The lining is copper, so it makes the actual end product look like it's copper. Okay. And this is the we had 3 of these, over 2,000 tons of steel. They're big. They're not like the ones when you're riding down the motorway and you see them on the side of the road. These are humongous. Okay. The towers and the mast actually, what they do, they bring the firm in and they ease the ropes that hold it there, and they pull it so many degrees towards you, and then when you cut the stays at the back, it drops over. That's what it tells you in the textbook. I can assure you it don't always happen like that. This is me quite a few years ago in the middle of Kidderminster on a Sunday morning, dropping a multi-storey car park, which is only, if you went round the other side, is in a pedestrian rise and only 3 metres from a shopping complex.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire!
Okay, this is an interesting one. This was the last block of flats that I should probably do. And this was up in Scotland, and one of the problems they'd had a few of these drop in Scotland. There was a big mass demolition program a few years ago where they got council had money and they dropped quite a few buildings, and they had a few that didn't come down. And one of the problems they had, because they was using shock tube detonators, and as you all know, if you use them, it's like a daisy chain. So unlike electric dets, you can't do a circuit resistance test on them. So you've got to rely that everybody's done the job correctly. You can have something like 2,500 detonators in these buildings. And if one fails on the connection as it goes up and down the building, then the rest doesn't carry through. The building sometimes has dropped down, so when they start to muck out, they find out there's explosives and detonators not gone off in the building. So I use my film industry expertise on the last one I did. And what I did, you'll see it when we go, across every floor, because they don't do every floor, I put some aluminium flash powder hanging out the window. And this tells me that actual floor is gone. So we know. So if I was doing it, it dropped, and I saw on the 5th floor no flash, then I would assume there'd be explosives in the building. This is how the Americans do it. We wouldn't be able to get away with it here. You have to take your hat off to them. This is the Americans again up at Sellafield. I worked with them on this. And again, it's an interesting piece of filming because it gives it a little bit more into how cooling towers come down. We've got 4 coming down not far from me on, I think, June the 6th at Ridley. They're not easy to drop. Even though they're only about 4 to 5 inches thick with concrete, there's a technique, and if you don't get it right, they'll stand.
2, 1, fire. We're clear.
25 milliseconds later, the 200 leg charges ignite. 1 second later, Malc explodes the second tower in the same sequence.
Okay, they use what they call an inverted T. So if you look at the cooling towers and go inside, about 30 or 40, 50 feet up, they'll do a metre ring all the way, what I call a domino 5 with short holes in, which they'll put cord and about 1 inch of nitroglycerine. And then they have an inverted T. So they'll put another one up, an upside down T in the middle. And so basically the legs go just a little bit after, and then that inverted T, which twists it and brings it down. This is the tax office in Bootle. Quite a few years ago, I did with the Americans, Mark Larazzo. This was probably one of the biggest buildings that I've done, and most of the concrete in this was 3 feet thick, especially in the basement part. So it was one hell of a job. And just down here is the HSE Explosive Inspectorate. So it was an interesting job, yeah. I could tell you a few stories, but I won't on this one. But this is it, and it was the first time. Generally in the UK, we do demolitions of high-rise building with millisecond detonators. So there's 25 milliseconds between each bang. The Americans use half second, which is a long time if you're not used to it. So you can basically press the button. You'll hear your first bang, you've got time to go in your bag, get your camera, set it up and start to film before it even starts to drop. It's forever. Just to wind up now, I don't know if anybody who saw the Sony ad a few years ago, I got involved with that. This is where they use coloured paints for Sony, which cost 14 million to make. 3-minute ad, made up of 5-gallon containers, IBCs, all we call them coloured paint, paddling pools to create paint spreading all over, and then we demolished the building a couple of weeks after. So here's your first take, because they did it in 3 takes. Okay. Now then, this little puppy here, I helped develop this with Charlie Adcock. It it's now used all through the world, but with the SAS and various people to get into vehicles and to actually break down walls. What it is, it's a cannon. The best way I can explain it, in your offices, you'll have these water containers that you drink your cold water out of. Well, they're loaded into that with water in it, and it'll actually go through concrete, breeze block, and it'll go into a building. So they'll have this on the back of a vehicle. They'll go to a site where there may be an IED inside, and they'll run that up, fire it in, and actually then they can go inside with a camera. So nobody's going to be near to it if it goes bang. So this is it working. Then I'll explain what other use it has in the next slide.
3, 2, 1, fire!
And that's just water. Okay.
3, 2, 1, fire!
Now, what we did with that after, and the film industry use hundreds of these now, we put these in the floor and put coloured paints in it. So that when you see it firing up, it's that puppy there doing it for them. There's the, so it was all done with electric deaths. There was over 7,000 charges in that, so it's quite a complex wiring up system. You can see the 5-gallon little drums on there, all fastened off. So the whole idea again is to get it to go up the building from the bottom to the top with the coloured paints on. Sad Scots. Paddling poles in the top are omitted to say in those 5-gallon drums is a cartridge of nitroglycerine to move the paint and push it about. And then we had cartridges of explosives in the top of these that gave the raise at the top of the building, yeah? IBCs hanging off cranes. And then you can see the effects after. And this is the actual ad. Okay, thanks. Hope you've enjoyed that short talk and a little bit of my life, yeah?
Malcolm, thanks ever so much for that. That was very interesting. And how are your nerves?
They're pretty good.
No serious shaking or anything?
No, I'm okay.
That's very interesting. Very interesting, Malcolm.
It's a bit different, but it just gives you an insight, from people who are working in quarry and just how some of the things in the film industry work. Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate you giving your time up, Malcolm.
Okay, cheers.
And I know from personal experience, it's fascinating to speak to, so I thought I'd like to share it with the other members of the IOQ. And much appreciated. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to put to Malcolm?
Hi, Malcolm.
Hello, Jim. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Listen, while you're on, just because of something that's been happening with ourselves recently, is what kind of licenses and paperwork do you need to put in place to allow you to do those wonderful things?
It's an interesting question, Jim. The bigger the film, the less the problem. For example, I've been in the centre of London with a 25 kilogram box of nitroglycerine. You're basically given carte blanche. Nobody asks any questions. So it's a difficult question for me to answer. The one interesting one is how do they qualify to be able to do this? And that's another good question. The only thing we've got is the BS 5607 blast into the construction industry as a guideline, but there isn't a qualification. So these guys that use all this stuff out there, there is a BEC2, which is their trade union. They do a course down in Bristol, but there's no NVQ assessment whatsoever. So like a lot of things in the construction industry and the demolition industry, again, there isn't a qualification. So until, God forbid, we have an accident, then maybe some people will start and sit up. So the paperwork is no different to, shouldn't be no different to if you're going from BAM down to a site and you're going to do something small that day. It actually is the same. It should be the same. You know, storage is always a problem, but a lot of these are closed sites. They may be on a military base or different things, so you can probably get away with a few things there. But the same problems, but probably not the same issues. Yeah? If that answers your question, yeah?
It does, thank you.
Anyone else want to ask? I'm 77 years of age, guys. You know, I haven't got long. I shall soon be with my whippet and but I've never been so busy. At the moment, just to let you know, my work these days takes me to Mines Rescue, where I train shot firers from the construction industry, tunnelling. I'm a full-time consultant up at Anglo on the shaft sinking exercises at Whitby. And I'm doing some work in Southern Ireland with London Bridge. So you know, I keep telling the wife I'm going to finish at the end of every year, and here I am still talking to you people. But it gets harder. It doesn't get easier. Yeah, when you reach my age.
You mentioned that some of your techniques are from experience. A little bit of how many fingers you've got, but I was quite interested to see what sort of effect it has on some of the more sensitive properties that you're actually creating some of the effects around. You said obviously it's very difficult because a lot of them are one-offs, whereas in the quarries we tend to plan with the use of regression lines from historic experience. So how would you go about trying to protect a sensitive property from air overpressure and vibration point of view?
Well, vibration really isn't an issue. It's more the air overpressure, Rod, yeah? You'll appreciate. Yeah. Because we're using detonating cord, miles and miles of it outside, yeah? Yeah. And again, a lot of it is from experience, but and again, as I said to Jim, it's whether it's a blockbuster film where money is no object, or a little film, Coronation Street, where they're going to do something where the money's not so big. So, but we do trials, and we actually, at the back of Pinewood or somewhere, will try and develop a trial where it mimics what we're going to do, and we'll use air overpressure monitors. Normally an independent company, sort of EPC, will bring in, because Rob Farmfield has worked close with me, especially on the film industry as well, and get a regression line for the air overpressure. But there also is, and anybody wants to bother to email me, I do have a spreadsheet that I've built over the years, and you can get it out of the American books. If you have 10 meters or 20 meters of cord, it'll give you an indication what the air overpressure is going to be, or windows breakers. A useful little tool, yeah. So you can do it that way, from experience and from a spreadsheet. But you're right, it isn't something that you should just go onto the site and do it. You will have problems, yeah.
Thank you.
If anybody has any further questions or would like Malcolm's email address, please feel free to get in touch with myself. And if it's all right, Malcolm, I'll pass it on.
Yes, I have no problem with it whatsoever. Yeah.
Great stuff. Well, Malcolm, once again, thank you ever so much.
Okay, it's a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
And thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks, Mark.
No,
That was
Okay,
brilliant.
cheers.
Very much,
Really
Malcolm.
enjoyed it. Goodbye,
Okay,
everyone.
then.
Thank you.